Hey, 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 welcome to episode 129 of the Live Your Fuck Yes Life podcast. I'm Amanda Catherine Loy, and today I'm doing something kind of different, and I am going live on TikTok as I record this. I've been doing some lives on there if you follow me with my husband, Kevin, and we talk a lot about all things polyamory because that's been a big part of what I talk about on that platform. But I thought it would be really fun to go live on both TikTok and while I record today's podcast, because I am doing today's podcast all around your Q&A, your questions around all things queerness and ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, whatever the fuck you wanted to know. And I asked a poll and a question box on Instagram, as well as did a TikTok asking your questions. But for anyone who is watching live on TikTok, they can also get their questions answered as we go. And I'm stoked. So we'll see how many people show up live on a, Wednesday afternoon when a lot of people are probably working. But hell, if you get on live and you can get your question and answer, amazeballs. Before we officially get into it, if you are new to the podcast, we are on season 4. We're wrapping up season 4 as we head into Pride Month next month. Of the Live Your Fuck Yes Life podcast, which is so fucking crazy to think that I started this. I mean, I guess it's been over since February 2018 is when I started the pod. Hi for all you guys hopping on TikTok. And I haven't done a Q&A episode in a really long time. And this last season of the podcast has been really, really focused on so much of my journey with polyamory and stepping into my queerness. I mean, the first episode 101 of this season, was me coming out as poly publicly for the first time. And I had no idea that would elicit or bring about the journey that it has, that I would be doing peer support sessions with so many of you from TikTok who have booked one-on-one support session, that I would be doing community chats and Q&As that are more private and supportive, like the Let's Talk Polyamory ones that I run every month. And I know a lot of you have been asking if I'm going to be doing more of those. The answer is yes. But today I thought it could be really fun to do sort of like a AMA vibe episode with your questions, because a lot of the time you guys ask me these questions in my DMs or in my small AMAs that I run on Instagram, and it's really hard to give long and drawn out answers. Beyond just like a few words here and there, or, you get the 60-second limit on Instagram or on TikTok. And I'm a verbose person. I like to be able to really like get into the nitty gritty of things. So I have a bunch of questions that you have already asked me from the question box on Instagram. But for all of those who are hopping on live on TikTok or anywhere else, feel free to, ask a question in the comments, and I will also ask that now. That's what part of why we're going live. So I'm going to start with the first question I got, and one that I get asked a lot, which is, when did I know that I was bi? And I came out officially as bi at the beginning. Nope. Was it the beginning of season 3 of the pod? I don't remember exactly. It was the fall of 2019 that I came out publicly as bisexual. And it was really scary for me to do so, because I'm a 30-year-old woman, and I have been married to a man for 10 years. And on the outside, my life looks really, looks really straightforward, and I use the word with intention, and I know I've spoken to a lot of people both in TikTok communities and on Instagram who are bi or pan or identify as queer, but are in a heteronormative looking relationship. And it can be really frustrating to be just assumed one thing when at the reality, like, our sexuality is a really big part of who we are and how we feel most in alignment. And just because someone has a male identified partner or a female identified partner doesn't speak to their sexuality at the end of the day, or it doesn't inherently speak to their sexuality. And for me, that is 1,000% true. But I was not aware of that for a really long time. I masqueraded unknowingly as a straight person for most of my life. And it's interesting. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's interesting because I, have always been and identified as such an ally with the LGBTQ community. I mean, I have such a massive background in theater. So many of my friends are gay, family members, and so the potential of that being a part of my story didn't elicit shame from the outskirt. And yet what I do realize and have realized within my own journey is that I didn't really see a lot of people outside of the occasional spark on the media, a lot of women dating other women. So much of my exposure in the LGBTQ space growing up and in my early 20s were all of my, gay male friends. And it was really tough for me to see anything else. And also, because I was so sexually attracted to men and had been in relationships with men, I was like, well, if I'm having these inklings, does that mean I'm gay? But it didn't feel right. And at the time growing up, bisexuality, and it still is in a lot of spaces, it's really shifting. But at the time growing up, bisexuality was often depicted and expressed as, the pathway to gay, that it wasn't really a valid way of identifying sexually speaking. And that really, really threw me off for a lot of my years. I was and am madly in love with my husband. I've known him for 10 years. We've been together for 10 years. And, so I'm attracted to this woman. Oh, like I have the inkling of wanting to maybe pursue something here. Does that inherently mean that I'm gay? And what does that mean for our relationship? And so it was really confusing for me. And I met him when I was 19, just about to turn 20. So my whole 20s, I struggled, and really just identified as a straight woman. And yes, I am podcasting currently. So if any of you on TikTok have any questions about this, let me know and I'll answer it on the pod as well as here today. But I think for me, what I really, in terms of knowing when I was bi, like that moment, I joke about this a lot on my Instagram and also on my TikTok, but it's true that, when I first saw Ruby Rose on Orange is the New Black, something happened to me. And I went from being like, women are attractive and you can totally, see that and understand that and feel that, to, oh, I want to bang her. Like I want to experience the bedroom with this human. And obviously that wasn't like a flood of like, what does this mean? And I can acknowledge my bisexuality all in one moment, but it did give me, it gave me the foundation to explore that curiosity and myself in that way in a deeper meaning. And I had always talked pretty openly with Kev about, how I believe sexuality was fluid. And while I was like, I'm straight, like I still can, feel attraction in women. And, we just started talking about it really openly. And the more I explored that curiosity, the more that I really got to know myself. And in my mid, till later 20s, I was doing a lot of self-development work, a lot of really, really expansive shadow work and unpacking my trauma and working through a lot of stuff. It all kind of came to a head around a lot of different things, and my sexuality was one of those as well. So, but that moment is, the first true identifying moment for me, and a lot of people ask me like, oh, do you need to have had an experience with, like, if you were like me and you're a woman, a female identified human, and you are, in a relationship with a male identified person, and you have never interacted with a woman, sexually speaking, romantically speaking, does that necessarily mean that you are, like, can you say that you're bi if you've never had that experience? And I will say that before I, stepped into the ethical non-monogamy world and was actually, starting to identify as polyamorous, I believed that narrative, that I couldn't own my bisexuality. And even though I came out as polyamorous later than when I identified bi, I had already been poly for, I want to say 6 months before I came out as bisexual publicly. Or wait, longer. A year and a half, before I came out publicly. And all of our experiences are different, but I believe that your sexuality has nothing to do with the sexual acts, at the end of the day. And sure, those can help you solidify and help validate you. It certainly did for me. The first time I was intimate with a woman really helped me feel validated in my knowing of my sexuality. And it was so exciting and liberating to experience firsthand, but you don't have to have that experience in order to know. So I really think that my knowing, like I said, it really started with the Ruby Rose thing, and that's been really fun. So, okay, I'm going to answer a question that I got on TikTok. We'll switch it up. Do you feel that you're successful in the poly world? And they followed up with the definition of success is that everything is working as you planned. So if that is your definition of success, then I would say I am incredibly unsuccessful. I don't know that you can plan your experience in the ethical non-monogamy space, or even frankly in any space in life. Like, you can certainly try and have hopes and have a framework that you would like to navigate. But at the end of the day, when you're stepping into something that you don't know or have a deep awareness around your interaction, what that might look like, I think it's really hard to have it look exactly the way that you expected it to, unless you're forcing yourself into spaces. And I personally don't believe in that. I believe in growth and evolution, and in, actively pursuing what feels good and aligned and right, instead of trying to force fit my way into something that I had an expectation around, or I thought it might be. That being said, my biggest goal when I stepped into polyamory was that it would only empower and support my marriage, and not, create a rift in that journey, because I have seen that happen in a lot of spaces. And a lot of the time it's because the people who actually enter into E&M are entering into it for misaligned reasons, or trying to fix something in their relationship, and they think that opening up might provide space for that, when in reality it's not about that at all. I always say, please go in with a really solid foundation before you broach the idea or step into the space of E&M. And I'm really proud to say that, my marriage is thriving, and that we are better than ever. And that while we certainly have had bumps along the way, and it's been a roller coaster, because it's a roller coaster, as we talk about pretty explicitly on past episodes of the podcast, especially when we did the Let's Talk Polyamory series on the podcast, when Kev came on and talked as well. If you missed that, go back and listen. They're great episodes. But, at the end of the day, I thought we were great communicators when we came in to this space 3 years ago, and we're like night and day better. And just so much more open to growth and expansion, and the unconditional love that I feel for this man is just, it's boundless. And that was, for me, that was my pillar of what it would be to be successful. And I'm really proud of that. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. Next question that I got on Instagram is, what have been the hardships of coming out late in life? Yeah, it's so interesting. I've connected with so many of you that have also been late to coming out. And I will say that I kind of feel this twofold. One, I feel like constantly like a baby gay, like, and yet I'm 30. So it's interesting to feel really new in a space, in a community, and in your own experience of yourself when you are a more established person. It's a really wild ride, and has been a really wild ride for me. I still get so clammy. Like, I'm a really confident person and I get so clammy when I speak to women, when I go on dates with women, like I get nervous, and the dynamic of figuring that out for me has been really challenging because my whole life, I've dated men, and it's been different. It's been a really different experience, and rightfully or wrongfully, and I believe more so on the wrongful space, there's a lot of gender norms that exist in a male identified and female identified relationship. And I haven't always taken that on for size, but I think a lot of them inherently kind of exist, especially in the bedroom, And when it comes to dating women, for me, those expectations don't exist. There's a lot more like who's going to exist in what space, and how are we going to have these conversations and know, how we can support each other in that space. And that has been like a really big one that I didn't expect. I should have seen that coming, but I've not really been with a lot of women. Certainly none pre coming out 3 years ago and stepping into poly. So that's been, I don't know that I want to say hardship, but definitely like an unexpected experience. And I've still yet to, honestly, and I haven't really ever talked about this live before, but I've yet to really connect and click with a woman that like sexually we're super, super compatible. Like, I identify as a switch and can definitely play the role of dom, but I think I lean more to the subspace. And most of the women that I've ended up with have been definitely on the subspace. So it would be really nice to be able to connect with a female identified human who is either switch like me and like really can fully embody that space, or leans more dom. So we'll see if that ever comes up. Okay, I think I saw a question on TikTok. Yes. Is your husband poly as well? If not, what were some of the challenges you've experienced together? Yes, he is also poly. We talked about our experience around all of this on some of the previous episodes, like I said before, on the Let's Talk Polyamory series on here. We've talked a lot about our shared experiences and how we actually have a lot of different feelings around stuff around poly, whether that's jealousy, abandonment stuff. We went into pretty intense deets around all of that stuff. Okay. Next question from Instagram is, how did you acknowledge you were poly and not just wanting an open relationship? This is a really good question. I actually just did a TikTok about the differences between polyamory and open relationships. And while everyone kind of has their own definitions for things, generally speaking, an open relationship is when a couple that is already formed decides to open up. You hear that concept a lot, open up. And usually that opening up is them opening up to the potential of other sexual or intimate connections. But there are different agreements in play than with polyamory. Often those agreements remove the ability to form strong emotional connections, to fall in love with somebody else. It really is more about the sexual exploration component of it. And yeah, that can look like friends with benefits. But forming a long-lasting, like true partnership isn't usually at all on the table in an open relationship dynamic. And polyamory, on the other hand, is focused deeply around the potential for, longevity and commitment and deep, loving relationships. And yes, sexual intimacy, not always, but often. But it's about the whole picture. with multiple humans, or the potential for that with multiple humans. And, at first, I definitely think that we were thinking that we were going to be more of in the open space, I wasn't really expecting to step into poly at all. For me, I just really wanted to have some sexual experiences with women, and whether those were friends with benefits or, like more of a long-term casual fling, thing with somebody that I really liked and got along with. That's what I thought it would step into. But very quickly, I realized that being demisexual and knowing my heart, that I couldn't separate the potential for a true emotional connection, and that doing so would be really limiting to me personally. And my husband also felt that same way. So within I think a week or two of officially actively opening up and having, we shared about our first experiences on the podcast, and since doing that and having that first experience, it was like, oh yeah, I am poly. And for me, it was also, I always say this and people always ask me what did poly feel like? And I talk about this a lot on dating apps with people when we're talking about our versions of polyamory and how we practice. And for me, polyamory has felt like coming home to myself, because while I wasn't practicing polyamory, I didn't have the verbiage. I didn't even know it was a legitimate way to, enter into relationship with humans. Philosophically, the idea of having the capacity to love multiple people and having deep, intimate relationships, and not just I'm not meaning I don't use the word intimate just solely from a sexual standpoint, but romantic and really close and vulnerable relationships with multiple people has always been in alignment with me. Always. I have had really deep, intimate friendships my whole life. And I've never understood the concept of, your other half. It's not at all something that I felt like I could complete somebody else, or that they could complete me. I've always felt like a complete being in and of my own self. And that any relationship that I brought into my life would just be, blending to the overflow and the joy. And why limit that, if I don't need to. To me, polyamory is about freedom of expression, freedom of potential. And it just made a lot more sense. So that's why I went that route, and how I was able to quickly acknowledge that too. Okay. Now another question on TikTok is, do you date both men and women? Yes. It's a very quick answer. I'll do another one on TikTok. My partner currently blames my poly desires on being ADHD. It's really invalidating. Have you heard of this? That does sound really invalidating. And I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry that you're navigating that. I will say that I haven't heard a lot about this topic personally. I'm sure there are lots of poly people that are in the ADHD space. It's very, common. And I just send you nothing but love around that, because your way of being and way of wanting to love or feeling inclined to love, no matter where it stems from, is valid. And, what your truth is around that space at the end of the day is what matters. And I hope that they can come to terms with that and learn to support you through that space. And in the meantime, we're here to support you. Okay. I loved this question that I got on Instagram. And it's, what has been your favorite part of being poly? Ooh, we've been going for a while. Let me take a quick sip of my afternoon coffee. Okay. I love this question. So for me, gosh, so many things. I think, like I said before, it has really been a missing piece of my liberation story. Oh, I get kind of choked up talking about that. Being able to not just own my bisexuality, but step into that and explore it and really expand into the philosophies that have always been in alignment with me, but that I've never really fully practiced in sexuality in the way that I do relationships. It's been really liberating. And it's also introduced me to other like-minded folk who are just incredibly amazing, who aren't afraid to break the mold and the status quo, who are working towards liberation and who really value authenticity and honesty and openness. And you don't always see this in the polyamory space. There are a lot of people who unfortunately use that as a excuse for cheating or in a really shitty way. But I will say that the majority of the people that I have met that, are truly poly, are just really fucking epic humans. And whether those people end up being people I date or just become friends with, it's really expanded my community in a beautiful way. And also expanded what I get to do on a daily basis in a way that I never expected. I mean, I never anticipated my polyamory story or journey to blow up on TikTok the way it has. That I have almost 20,000 followers on there, 20,000 beautiful humans who I have had the pleasure of interacting with some of you face-to-face in one-on-one peer support sessions or in our, most recent Let's Talk Polyamory Q&A, like community private Zoom, which I'll be doing more of for all of you who are listening and watching. And just getting to hear your stories and meet you face to face. It's been such a gift I didn't expect. And honestly, that has been such a beautiful joy because frankly, I don't have a lot of people in my life other than partners or people I've dated that are poly. And it's just been so beautiful to form this community with like-minded souls. So for all of you watching live right now on TikTok, I just thank you for being here. Okay. We got some more on TikTok. We're going to do 2 more questions and then I'm going to have to hop off because this is going to be a long ass episode otherwise. Okay. What was the initial reason you opened up? Initially, it was rooted in my desire to explore my bisexuality. I brought it up. We had talked about it really since we first met, how monogamy was kind of a strange concept to both of us, but we were both really aware that we had a lot of wounds and stuff from our past that we wanted to work through before entertaining the idea of anything else. And also, societally, it wasn't really taught that that was an acceptable path. It still isn't, but it's becoming a lot more mainstream, which I'm so grateful for. And for me, it was really, stepping into poly was really at the beginning so that I could explore that. And that was my personal reason, and why I brought it up to my husband is hey, we should really do this, and we went from there and had a lot of conversations before, for a couple of years before we officially took that step. So, okay. Tips for dealing with primary partners feeling left out. I talk about this a lot on the jealousy episode of the Let's Talk Polyamory series on the podcast. So go back a little bit. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I highly encourage it. So I'm not going to talk about it too much. And I'm going to answer one more question after this. But I will just say that I was that person. The feeling of left out sucks. It can feel really, really tough. And I will say that it's kind of twofold. One, the person who is feeling that way, there's some unpacking work to do and self-care and soothing around why that's coming up and being able to support yourself through that process because, it's part of the shift to a new dynamic. And for the partner who is partnered with that person who's feeling left out, the best thing you can do is to make sure that you're creating space for really beautiful quality time together and that you're validating them and whatever they need, whether those are affirmations or little notes, anything you can do to make sure that they continue to feel the love and support and the foundation of your own relationship, because polyamory can be really jarring when you're so accustomed to operating in a monogamous framework, and making sure that you tend to that relationship is huge. Okay, so all right, there's 2 more questions on this, so I'm going to answer them both and then we'll be done. So hopefully that way I'll have gone to everybody's who's already asked. Okay. Is there a way to help a partner with jealousy issues towards one gender but not another? This is such a beautiful question. It's tough. I wish this wasn't a thing, because people are just freaking people. But the reality is that, this comes up. It's happened in my own relationship on both ways. And, I think what comes into play here is that because of whatever gender we identify with, there tends to be or can be more of a comparison with a like gender, right? And it's why you see a lot of poly pitfalls that I talked about, the OPP, which policy, I'm doing this for censorship reasons. Normally I would say that word on the pod, but we're going live on TikTok at the same time. And it's, because of that insecurity, that fear of replacement, which again, we also do talk about a lot in those episodes in the series. And I will just say that, like, it's shitty, it sucks, it feels unfair. And if that's the reality of their feelings, the best thing you can do is just support them through those feelings of jealousy, right? Jealousy is not a bad thing. Jealousy is a really normal emotion. And, all you can do is work through it together and individually. Okay. The last question was, given you're not exclusive, how do you keep yourself safe when it comes to STDs? So this is a great question. And just a reminder that they are STIs now, I believe, for a few years now. I think they've been shifted in that space. But I also don't believe in the phrase safe sex, because it just says that, like, you're always going to be safe. And I believe in the term safer sex. You can be really intentional. And I actually think that people, and I've seen that people in the poly community, not always, but for the most part, tend to operate in a lot more of a safer sex space, because they have to be conscious of themselves and their other partners in a very different way than monogamous folks do. So, that looks different for everybody. I have very, very, very specific agreements in place around my protocol with interacting with any new sexual partner. I, get tested very regularly, and I will not, interact with someone in a sexual nature unless they've been tested recently, and in a way that feels in alignment with myself. So I can get into more detail around that on, a more one-on-one space, or in our next Let's Talk Polyamory space. I can't really talk about it too much on TikTok because I will probably get censored for it. But yes, it's very, 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 very simple to do. And actually, like I said, it tends to be a lot safer in the poly community because humans are amazeballs. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Whether you are listening to the podcast or have been watching the TikTok live, if you want to get in touch with me and operate in a more specific way around all things polyamory and bisexuality, I do have a Patreon. If you just want to support, we don't have a Discord community, but I've had a few people bring that up, so I will look into that. But in the interim, you can always book a one-on-one peer support. I do 30-minute and 60-minute peer support sessions via Zoom. They're completely private and confidential. And I also will be doing another Let's Talk Polyamory community private Zoom coming up in June. So keep your eyes peeled or follow me on Instagram for that, because that's where I announce all of those things. And if you are really wanting to deep dive into your sexuality and all of the good stuff in that space, I am running my next Live Your Fuckiest Life virtual summit which is going down in a private Facebook group live. And it's all around all things sex and sexuality. So come on over. You can check it out at the link in my bio, in my TikTok, or in my Instagram, or the show notes of this podcast. You just purchase your Eventbrite ticket. If you are a BIPOC or LGBTQ folk, please DM me on Instagram for a $10 off discount. The tickets are only $30 normally, so it's just $20 for a whole summit of goodness. And you get to experience some of my favorite facilitators and guest speakers around all sorts of topics in that space. It's going to be such a fun time. Whether you can attend live or just watch the replays, you can snag your ticket, like I said, again, in the link in my bios on any of my socials, or in the show notes of this episode, which is, as always, at AmandaCatherineLoy.com/podcast/129. I can't believe that we are almost at the end of this magic, that we're about to get to Pride Month. I'm so stoked. And yeah, this has been such a fun episode. Thank you for being here. Until next time, we'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye.